Imagine this. You are a 37-year-old entrepreneur. A few years ago, you sold your last company for a fortune, walking away with somewhere around $180 million. Most people in that position buy a house, buy a boat, maybe start one safe new business and call it a day. You did not do that. You took almost the entire fortune and split it across two brand new companies that most people think are a waste of money at best and a delusion at worst. Company one builds a kind of vehicle almost nobody thinks can work at scale in a world that still mostly pictures it as a golf cart with delusions of grandeur. Company two is attempting something no private company in history has pulled off, launching a machine into orbit and getting it back in one piece without it becoming very expensive confetti. You've put almost every dollar you personally own into both. Not some of it, almost all of it. People describe you generously as ambitious, less generously as a man who has never once been told no and actually believed it. The rocket company attempts its first launch. It fails. Expensive but survivable. It attempts a second launch. It also fails. Expensive and less survivable, but you're still standing. Then comes the third attempt, mid-year, and this is the one that should have ended things quietly. The two halves of the rocket collide with each other seconds after separating, which is the kind of failure that would be slapstick comedy in a movie if it wasn't every dollar you own turning into debris on a tracking screen. 3 failures in a row. You have parts and funding for exactly one more attempt. Not 2 more. 1. The company's entire future now depends on a single roll of the dice, and you already know the house usually wins. Meanwhile, the vehicle company is burning through roughly $4 million a month. It does not have $4 million a month to burn. It barely has $4 million, full stop. This is the point where the people around you, the ones whose entire professional function is to give you good advice, start saying the obvious thing out loud. Pick one. You cannot save both. Choose the company you can actually rescue, and let the other one sink before it drags the winner down with it. Here's where I want you to actually stop and make the call yourself. You have enough left to give one company a real shot, not 2. 1. Comment right now which one you'd save, the vehicle company or the rocket company, because I'd bet whatever you just picked isn't what happens next. Let's actually play out both versions, because it changes everything. Say you save the rocket company and let the vehicle company die. The vehicle company maybe survives, but the rocket company disappears before it ever reaches orbit. No reusable rockets, no cheap satellite launches, no company 2 decades later launching astronauts on a regular schedule. And here's the part that makes this genuinely cruel. The momentum and the investor confidence behind both companies were tangled together more than anyone wants to admit. Kill one, and there's a real chance you quietly kill the other anyway, just a few months later than you expected. The statistically smart move is to pick one and stop the bleeding, which is exactly why refusing to do that is the strange, defining decision of this whole story. If there's any way to save both, you're going to try, against the advice of almost everyone in your life who is objectively better at this specific math than you are right now. Then everything comes down to one attempt, the 4th launch, with whatever money and whatever parts are left. It reaches orbit, it works. First private attempt in history to actually pull this off on the last try you could afford to make. A failure here was the end of the story, full stop, and it is not a failure. You go from a man everyone quietly expected to fail to the first private founder in history to put a liquid-fueled rocket into orbit inside the span of about 11 minutes of flight time. Within months of that launch, the rocket company lands a contract worth $1.6 billion, the kind of number that makes investors who, 3 failed launches ago, thought you were setting money on fire for fun, suddenly very eager to have a meeting. One half of your impossible bet is now improbably safe, but the vehicle company still is not safe, still bleeding, and now needing an entirely new round of funding just to make payroll before the year runs out. So you put in what's left, every dollar you personally have, no house left to sell, nothing left if this does not work, which is the kind of sentence that should put your worst month at your own job into some serious perspective. The funding round closes at 6 p.m. on December 24th. The last hour of the last day, it was possible to close it. 2 days later, payroll bounces on a car company at Christmas in front of every employee who trusted you with their job. If this were actually your life, this is probably the closest you'd ever come to what people mean when they say they had a breakdown. Everything you built came down to a 6 p.m. deadline on Christmas Eve, and it worked by hours, not days. And if you made every one of these calls correctly against nearly all of the advice you were given right now, you'd be one of the richest and most recognizable people on the entire planet. Here's the twist. This was never hypothetical. The year was 2008, and the person who refused to choose between them, where every number you just heard is completely real, and the two companies were actually Tesla and SpaceX, was Elon Musk. If you guessed it before this exact moment, tell me which line gave it away. I want to know how obvious I actually was. And if you want more of these, told exactly like this, subscribe, because there are a lot more real people hiding behind scenarios you haven't guessed yet.